I went camping with my dad, stepmom, and brother after losing my husband. One morning, they were gone. No food, no signal, just a note that said, "This is for the best." They left us to survive on our own. This isn't just a story about surviving the wilderness. It's about waking up to the most profound betrayal imaginable. Imagine, you're deep in the forest, only to find your entire family, your own flesh and blood, has vanished. They didn't just leave, they left you and your 9-year-old daughter there to die, and the chilling truth was, they expected you to. The cold was what woke me first, seeping through my sleeping bag, pulling me from a restless sleep. Something was terribly wrong. The forest felt too quiet, the air too still. I blinked against the pale dawn light filtering through our tent. "Tobin?" My voice was hoarse. No answer. I sat up, rubbing sleep from my eyes. Beside me, Willa slept soundly, her dark hair spilled across the pillow, one arm clutching the stuffed fox Alden gave her for her 8th birthday. She looked so much like him it made my heart ache. "Diane? Dad?" I unzipped the tent flap and poked my head outside. The clearing was empty. No tents, no vehicles, no coolers or camp chairs, no morning coffee percolating. "Hello." My voice bounced off the surrounding pines, mocking me with its echo. I crawled out bare feet, crunching on pine needles. The space where my brother's oversized tent stood just hours ago was flattened grass. The fire pit held nothing but cold ashes. My father's pride and joy, his vintage Airstream trailer, was gone, leaving only tire tracks in the soft earth. My blood turned to ice. Water. I spun in a complete circle, scanning the edges of our campsite. Nothing but trees and more trees stretching into the vastness of Willamette National Forest. This can't be happening. The words tumbled out as I hurried back to our tent, the only structure remaining. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone. No service, just as there hadn't been since the last ranger's station. I jammed my feet into my hiking boots and stepped back outside, desperation building in my chest. "Finn." I screamed his name until my throat burned. "Dad." "Diane." Something white caught my eye, a folded piece of paper tucked beneath a smooth river stone, near where the campfire had been. I lunged for it, nearly tripping in my haste. My brother's handwriting stared back at me. "This is for the best. Trust me. Tobin." I read it again and again. The words didn't change. "For the best." I whispered, my fingers crumpling the paper's edge. What does that even mean? I dropped to my knees, suddenly unable to stand. They planned this. My own family planned this. Our backpack sat propped against a nearby log, the daypack we used for yesterday's short hike. I crawled toward it and dumped the contents onto the pine needles. 2 water bottles, 3 protein bars, a lighter, a compass. My lungs constricted. Black spots danced at the edges of my vision. The forest around me spun as the realization hit me with physical force. They left us here. They left us here to die. Mommy? Willa's sleepy voice snapped me back to reality. I couldn't fall apart. Not now. Not when my daughter needed me. I shoved everything back into the pack with trembling hands and forced myself to take 3 deep breaths. In, out, in, out. "Coming, sweetie," I called, my voice miraculously steady. Inside the tent, Willa sat up, rubbing her eyes, her hair a tangled mess. "Where is everybody?" I sat beside her and smoothed her hair back from her forehead. "They had to leave early. Without saying goodbye?" Her lower lip trembled. "I know. It wasn't very nice." Understatement of the century. I swallowed the bitter rage rising in my throat. Willa looked at me with Alden's thoughtful brown eyes. "Are you okay, Mom? You look scared." My first instinct was to lie, to protect her, but Alden and I always promised we'd be honest with her. "I am a little scared," I admitted, "but we're going to be okay, I promise." Her small hand found mine. "Daddy used to say we're stronger than we think." The mention of Alden sent a fresh wave of grief through me. Just 4 months gone, taken by a liver disease that progressed too quickly. The healing weekend, that's what Tobin had called this trip. A chance for Willa and me to connect with family after our loss. For healing. What a cruel joke. I thought back to last night, the marshmallows roasting over the fire, Dad telling his exaggerated fishing stories, Diane showing Willa how to identify constellations. Everything had seemed so normal. How long had they been planning this? Mom? Willa's voice pulled me back. Again. What do we do now? I looked at my daughter, 9 years old and already too familiar with loss. Something inside me hardened into resolve. They thought they could break us. They thought. Wrong. I opened the backpack and took inventory again, methodically. 2 water bottles, 3 protein bars, lighter, compass. My mind shifted into problem-solving mode, the same way it did when Alden got sick, when the first doctor gave us his diagnosis, when I had to keep our business running while watching my husband fade away. One step at a time, that's how we'll survive this. Willa watched me with those solemn eyes, so much like her father's. I saw a flash of his strength in her face. We follow the water downstream, I told her, my voice growing stronger with each word. Water leads to people, and people can help us get home. She nodded, trusting me completely. I wouldn't let that trust be misplaced. I wouldn't let them win. The morning sun burned through the thin nylon of our tent. Sweat beaded along my hairline as I stuffed our sleeping bags into compression sacks. Willa sat cross-legged, carefully folding Alden's tattered field guide to Oregon wildlife. Mom, look what I found in my backpack. She held up the book, its spine cracked from years of use. Dad packed it for me special. My throat tightened. Even in death, Alden protected us better than my living family. That was thoughtful of him. I forced a smile, not wanting to burden her with the rage simmering beneath my skin. I turned back to our meager supplies. Something caught my eye, an uneven seam along the bottom of my backpack. I ran my fingers along the edge and felt a stiff paper hidden within the lining. What's that? Willa asked, peering over my shoulder. My fingernails worked at the stitching until it gave way. I pulled out a folded sheet of paper with familiar handwriting, Tobin's precise architectural lettering. A map. My blood ran cold as I traced the marked route. It led deeper into the wilderness, away from any ranger stations or campgrounds. The opposite direction from the water route I'd planned. Son of a, I bit back the word, conscious of Willa watching. He wanted us to get more lost. Who, Uncle Tobin? I nodded, my jaw clenched so tight it ached. The realization crashed over me like ice water. This wasn't just abandonment. This was calculated elimination. My mind raced backward through the past months. Tobin showing up at Alden's funeral with documents for me to sign. Just insurance papers, he'd said. Dad thinks it's best if I help you. As co-executor of the will, you have enough to worry about. I'd signed them, grief-blind and trusting. 3 weeks ago, Tobin had visited the flagship Willow and time location. His words echoed in my memory. The business is struggling without Alden. Let me buy in 20%. You need a partner now. The business is fine, I'd told him, showing him our latest quarterly reports. We're actually up 7% from last year. The flicker of something dark across his face should have warned me. The family dinner that followed turned tense when Dad backed Tobin. Victoria, be reasonable. Women don't think clearly after losing a husband. Tobin has your best interests at heart. I'd walked out, taking Willa for ice cream instead of enduring more reasonable advice from men who'd never brewed a day's worth of tea in their lives. Now it all made horrifying sense. Mom? Willa's voice pulled me back. What are we going to do? I struck a match and touched it to the corner of Tobin's map, watching as flames consumed his careful instructions. We're going to do exactly what he doesn't expect. We're going to survive. The paper curled and blackened, floating away as ash. I turned to the backpack's main compartment and emptied it completely, arranging everything on the ground. 2 water bottles, 3 protein bars, lighter, compass. I added Alden's guidebook to our inventory. Your dad loved this forest, I told Willa, running my hand over the book's weathered cover. He brought me here the first summer we dated. He showed me how to identify which plants were safe. Willa's eyes widened. He taught me too. Look. She pointed to a bush with small berries. Those are huckleberries. Dad said they're good to eat. My chest swelled with unexpected pride and hope. That's right. Your father is still helping us. I thought of my grandmother too. How she'd take me foraging in the woods behind her cottage, teaching me which barks could be brewed for headaches, which roots helped with stomach pain. Knowledge I'd later incorporated into our specialty tea blends. Knowledge that might keep us alive now. Here's what we're going to do, I told Willa, my voice stronger than I felt. We'll follow the water downstream, but we'll also look for food along the way. Your dad's book will help us know what's safe. She nodded solemnly, pulling the stuffed fox closer. The sky darkened as we worked together, gathering branches. I showed Willa how to weave them into a crude shelter, angling it against the wind as the first raindrops began to fall. Will someone come looking for us? She asked as we huddled under our makeshift roof. The question tore at me. I could lie, tell her help was just around the corner, but the truth was more terrifying. Dad and Diane had mentioned taking a cruise after our healing weekend. Emma, my business partner, knew I planned to take 2 full weeks off, my first real break since Alden's diagnosis. They will, I said carefully, but not right away. What I didn't tell her, no one will miss us for at least 2 weeks. By then, what would remain of our lives back home? How many documents would bear my forged signature? As night fell, Willa began to cough. I placed my hand on her forehead and felt unnatural warmth. A knot of fear tightened in my stomach. Just a little cold, she whispered, trying to sound brave. Rain pounded our shelter as I held her close, my mind racing through what Tobin stood to gain. Alden's life insurance, my business, Willa's trust fund. This wasn't just about survival in the wilderness. It was about what would be left to return to if we returned at all. Willa shivered against me, her small body radiating heat. Tell me a story about Dad, she murmured. I stroked her hair, watching raindrops find their way through our imperfect shelter, and began the story of how Alden and I built Willow and time from nothing but dreams and determination. The story of what Tobin was trying to steal from us both. The days blurred into one another. For sunrises since the morning I woke to find our family gone. For nights of fitful sleep on forest ground that never quite warmed beneath our bodies. I scratched another mark into the bark of the pine tree beside our makeshift shelter, using the tip of a sharp stone. Is it Thursday? Willa asked, her voice smaller than yesterday. I hesitated. I think so, sweetie. Time had become liquid here, flowing without the markers of schedules and clocks. Back home, Tobin was likely sitting in my office at Willow and Time. I pictured him at my desk, rifling through my files, calling our suppliers with that convincing voice of his. Such tragic news about Victoria, he'd say, voice pitched to perfect concern. But don't worry, the family is stepping in to handle everything. The weight of his betrayal sat like a stone in my stomach. Not just Tobin, but Dad, Diane. My own family calculated exactly how much my absence was worth to them. They measured the value of my life and Willa's and found it acceptable. When I closed my eyes, I saw Dad nodding his approval as Tobin outlined their plan. Victoria's always been soft, he probably said. She won't last 2 days out there. Willa coughed, pulling me from these poisonous thoughts. Her small body radiated heat as I pressed my palm to her forehead. Mom? Her eyes shone too bright. The trees are dancing. My heart hammered against my ribs. Fever. The protein bars ran out yesterday, and our last sips of clean water disappeared this morning. I'd been melting dew into a water bottle cap, but it wasn't enough. Just rest, I whispered, arranging our thin sleeping bag around her shoulders. While she drifted into restless sleep, I surveyed our surroundings with new desperation. The Tea shop owner, the woman who agonized over quarterly projections and customer satisfaction. Surveys seemed like a stranger now. That Victoria couldn't identify edible plants or build a shelter from pine branches. This Victoria had scraped together fire from friction and dried moss. This Victoria knew that hunger felt like a living creature, gnawing from the inside out. I touched the knife edge of a white willow leaf, remembering Grandma Rose's voice. Nature provides what we need if we know how to look. Mom had rolled her eyes at these lessons. Your grandmother. And her useless weeds, she'd say. Dad would nod, adding, real medicine comes from pharmacies. Victoria. But Grandma Rose knew better. White willow bark contains salicin, nature's aspirin. I stripped thin layers of bark from the willow tree, careful not to damage it deeply. My hands, once manicured for client meetings, were now cracked and dirt embedded. I crushed the bark between two rocks, then steeped it in water heated with hot stones from our small fire. Willa, I murmured, lifting her head. Drink this. It doesn't taste good, but it will help. She grimaced, but swallowed obediently. I stroked her tangled hair back from her burning forehead and sang the lullaby Alden created just for her. The words caught in my throat when I reached the second verse. He had voiced it so clear in my memory, it was as if he stood beside me. Night fell. The forest grew loud with unseen creatures. Willa's breathing remained rapid, her small body fighting the fever. I banked our fire carefully, preserving embers for morning. With Willa finally asleep, I crawled just beyond our shelter and let the tears come. Silent, shaking. Sobs that left me hollow. I don't know if I can do this alone, I whispered to the canopy of stars. A warm breeze touched my face, carrying the scent of pine and earth. For one impossible moment, I felt Alden's presence, solid and certain. You're stronger than all of them, his voice echoed in my memory. You always have been. Was it memory or imagination? Does it matter? I wiped my face with dirt-stained hands and returned to Willa's side. By morning, her fever had broken. She sat up, weak but clear-eyed, asking for water. The relief left me lightheaded. You did doctor stuff, she said, watching me collect dew from leaves like Dad showed me. Your dad showed you about medicines? Willa nodded. He said his mom was a nurse, so he knew things. He showed me stars, too. She pointed upward, though it was daylight now. That one that doesn't move is north. We can follow it at night. My throat tightened. Alden, still helping us find our way home. Together we foraged, Willa spotting a cluster of hazelnuts, me identifying blackberries growing in a sunny patch. We ate slowly, savoring each bite. The simple pleasure of food after near starvation brought tears to my eyes. Mom, look. Willa pointed to something half buried in moss. I brushed away decades of growth to reveal a faded metal marker and an old ranger trail sign. My fingers traced the embossed arrow pointing northwest. Civilization, I breathed. That afternoon we discovered a blackberry patch larger than the first, a feast compared to our meager findings. As Willa carefully picked the ripest berries, I tore a blank page from Alden's wilderness guide. Using charcoal from our fire, I began mapping our journey, marking the creek, the white willow grove, the ranger marker. What are you doing? Willa asked, purple juice staining her chin. Creating our way home, I answered. That night, with Willa asleep beside our small fire, I twisted my wedding ring around my finger. The gold caught the firelight, warm against my skin. For months after Alden died, this ring felt like a weight. Now it felt like strength. I thought of Tobin's smug face the last time we met, 3 weeks ago at the family dinner where he'd pressed me about selling part of Willow. And time to him. You're drowning, Vic, he'd said. Let me help before you take Alden's legacy. Down with you. His words had stung because part of me feared he was right. The grief had been suffocating, the business overwhelming without Alden's steady partnership. But here, stripped of everything except survival, I'd found clarity. My grief hadn't weakened me, it had tempered me. Like steel. Your dad loved these forests, I told Willa's sleeping form. He could name every tree, every star. He said nature reminded him that problems are temporary, but beauty is constant. Dad would have brought more snacks, Willa murmured, her eyes still closed. A startled laugh escaped me, the first real laughter in months. Yes, I agreed, wiping my eyes. He definitely would have. 8 days into our ordeal, I spotted a thin column of smoke rising above distant trees. My heart leaped, then hesitated. It could be a campfire, other hikers. Or it could be a forest fire. Dangerous and unpredictable. Willa followed my gaze. Is that people? Maybe. I chewed my lip. Calculating. We'd established a routine: shelter, water source, food we recognized. Moving meant risk. But staying meant giving Tobin more time to dismantle my life piece by piece. Willa's hand slipped into mine. Her fingers were thin, her once round face drawn from days of insufficient food. But her eyes, Alden's eyes, showed nothing but determination. Mom, we need to try, she said simply. I nodded, gathering our few possessions. Using strips torn from our sleeping bag, I fashioned a carrying pack to hold Willa when her strength inevitably failed. The smoke lay at least 2 miles away through difficult terrain. As I hoisted Willa onto my back, I felt something solidify within me. We will reach that smoke. We will find our way back. And when we do, Tobin and my parents will discover exactly what they've created. Not a victim, but a survivor. Not an obstacle easily removed, but a force they gravely underestimated. I took the first step toward the distant smoke, Willa's arms wrapped around my neck, her breath warm against my hair. Hold tight, I told her. We're going home. The ranger station stood before us like a mirage, its weathered logs and sagging porch the most beautiful sight I'd seen in days. My legs trembled beneath Willa's weight. 8 days in the wilderness had stripped us to essentials. We were hunger and determination wrapped in filthy clothes. Mom, is it real? Willa whispered against my neck, her voice cracked from dehydration. It's real, baby. I staggered the final 20 yards, pine needles crunching under my blistered feet. The door hung crooked on rusted hinges, a broken padlock dangling uselessly. Someone had been here before us, but not recently. Inside smelled of dust and animal droppings. Cobwebs draped the corners like tattered lace. But against the far wall sat exactly what I'd hoped for, a radio console, its metal casing dulled with age. I lowered Willa onto a wooden bench, our last protein bar clutched in her small hand. Tiny bites, remember? Make it last. The radio looked ancient, all knobs and dials instead of digital displays. I pulled off the dust cover and my heart leaped. No obvious damage, just disconnected wires and a missing power source. Tobin's voice echoed in my memory. Asterisk all that tech knowledge and you make tea for a living? What a waste of potential. Vic asterisk my fingers traced the disconnected wires, color-coded and familiar. The circuitry wasn't so different from the point-of-sale systems I troubleshoot at our shops. Engineering minor, business major, the degree he mocked might save our lives. Hours blurred as I worked, salvaging parts from an old flashlight I found in a drawer. Reconnecting wires with paper clips straightened between my teeth. Willa slept fitfully on the bench, her breathing shallow. When the power light finally blinked green, tears sprang to my eyes. Hello? This is Victoria Maddox at static cut through my words, then silence. The light flickered, then died. No. I pounded the console with my fist, desperation surging through me. So close. Willa stirred. Did it work? I swallowed hard. Time for plan B. Outside, we gathered fallen branches, arranging them in a massive H for helicopter in the clearing. My arms burned with effort as I dragged logs twice my weight. Willa helped despite her weakness, her determination a mirror of Alden's. The afternoon sun slanted low when we finished. I struck our precious lighter against kindling piled at each end of the H, wet leaves on the Flames, I instructed Willa. We need smoke more than fire. Green smoke billowed upward, a desperate prayer rising into the cloudless sky. We huddled together on a rock, scanning the horizon until our eyes burned. Mom, look. Willa pointed west, where a black speck moved against the blue. The helicopter seemed impossibly distant, its path taking it nowhere near our signal. Panic clawed at my throat. No, 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 they can't miss us. I fumbled at my neck, unclasping Alden's gift, a compass with a polished metal lid that caught the sun. I angled it toward the helicopter, flashing light in deliberate patterns. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. SOS in the universal language of light. The helicopter continued its path for 1 heart-stopping minute, then it banked, changing course toward our signal. They saw us. Willa's voice cracked with joy. We clung to each other, laughing and crying as the sound of rotors grew from whisper to thunder. The rescue team found us. Dehydrated, filthy, but alive. 10 days after waking to emptiness. A medic wrapped a thermal blanket around my shoulders. What happened? How did you end up here? I met his eyes, my voice steady despite my racing heart. My brother Tobin abandoned us here. He left us to die. The medic exchanged glances with his partner. Ma'am, that can't be right. Your family reported you missing yesterday. They've been frantic. Yesterday. The world tilted beneath me. 10 days in. The wilderness, but they only reported us missing yesterday? The calculation was simple. Devastating. They never expected us to survive this long. In the helicopter, Willa slept against me as we flew towards civilization. Beneath us, the forest stretched endless and green, beautiful and cruel. Like family. A ranger passed me a satellite phone. Hospital in Bend is standing by. They have some questions, something about a death petition that was filed. Death petition? My brother wasn't just hoping we'd die. He was counting on it. The hospital room door swung open later that day. Tobin stood framed in the doorway, his eyes red-rimmed with perfectly timed tears. A news camera hovered just behind his shoulder, catching his performance in high definition, but they didn't know I was already several steps ahead. Vicky, he breathed, rushing toward me with open arms. Thank God. We've been searching everywhere. I kept my hands folded in my lap, unmoved by the spectacle. Behind him, my parents filed in, faces arranged in identical masks of concern. My mother's pearl earrings caught the fluorescent light as she dabbed at dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. The whole community has been praying for you, Tobin continued for the benefit of the camera. His voice broke on cue. When we realized you and Willa had wandered off. The lie hung in the air between us. In the adjacent bed, Willa slept deeply, and 4 replenishing fluids in her thin arm. The camera crew needs to leave, I said quietly. Tobin's smile flickered. They're documenting our reunion. People have been following your story, out. The word came out sharp enough to slice. Once the door closed behind the camera crew, the transformation was immediate. My father's shoulders straightened, my mother's trembling lips stilled. Tobin's devastated expression hardened into something calculating. You've created quite a mess, my father said, voice low. Telling those rangers we abandoned you? Think about what you're doing to this family. My mother moved closer, her perfume too sweet in the antiseptic room. Darling, you were confused out there, dehydrated, imagining things. The doctors say you might have eaten something that caused hallucinations, Tobin added smoothly. It happens to hikers all the time. I noticed the small recorder in his pocket, red light blinking. Evidence of my supposed delusions, no doubt. We're just glad you're safe, my father continued. Now we need to handle this quietly. A man in an expensive suit appeared in the doorway, a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. Clifton Myers, our family attorney since I was a child. He nodded at my father before approaching my bed. Victoria, these are simple papers acknowledging your disorientation during the ordeal. He explained, sliding documents onto my tray table. Just a formality to clear up any Misunderstandings with the authorities. Tobin leaned close, his voice barely above a whisper. Fight this, and Willow will spend the next year in courtrooms and therapists' offices. Is that what you want for her after everything she's been through? The door opened again. Emma, my business partner, stepped in. Her typically composed face was drawn with worry. She glanced warily at my family before addressing me. They tried to access the company accounts, Vic. All of them, claiming you were missing and presumed dead. She held up her phone. They had papers drawn up. Tobin was positioning himself to take control of everything. My father's hand clamped down on her arm. This is a family matter. I looked at the papers. Before me, then at my sleeping daughter. For 10 days, we fought to survive. Now they expected me to surrender with the stroke of a pen. Could everyone please step back from my bed? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. Something in my tone made them comply. I reached for the call button and pressed it once. I'd like Agent Danvers to join us, please. I smiled at their confusion. We've been having some lovely chats while you were all searching for me. The FBI agent entered within moments, nodding. Respectfully, Miss Maddox. I believe it's time, I told her. From beneath my pillow, I withdrew a plastic evidence bag containing Tobin's mud-stained note. This was left under a stone. When my family vanished with all our supplies. My brother's handwriting. Agent Danvers took it. That matches our analysis. I pulled out my watch, cracked but functional. The GPS tracking was still working. It marks our exact location of abandonment, plus our desperate route to survival. My mother's hand flew to her throat. Victoria, stop this nonsense. The Rangers found something interesting at their abandoned station. I continued as if she hadn't spoken. The voice recorder. I activated after fixing their radio. I detailed everything. The note. The map marked with A. Route leading deeper into wilderness. The missing supplies. Emma stepped forward, placing a thumb drive on my tray table. And I brought these emails between Tobin and your father, discussing the takeover of Willow and time. Plans dated 3 weeks before your trip. This is absurd, my father blustered. You can't possibly believe the handwriting. Analysis came back, Agent Danvers interrupted. The note matches the forged will amendment we found in Mr. Myers' office files. More agents appeared in the doorway. Myers began stuffing papers back into his portfolio. We have a notary public who's suddenly very cooperative, Agent Danvers continued. Something about not wanting to be an accessory to attempted murder. I met my brother's eyes across the room. The hatred there didn't surprise me anymore. You left us to die, I said simply. But we survived. Agent Danvers nodded to her colleagues. Russell Bennett, Diane Bennett, Tobin Bennett, you're under arrest for attempted murder, child endangerment, conspiracy to commit fraud, and attempted embezzlement. The handcuffs clicked like punctuation marks at the end of a long sentence. I turned away as they were led from the room, my focus returning to Willa's sleeping form. Through the window, camera flashes lit up the hospital parking lot. A reporter thrust a microphone toward my brother as agents guided him toward a waiting vehicle. Miss Maddox, do you have a statement? A voice called from the doorway. I looked up, suddenly bone-weary. This was never about money, I said. It was about a child's life. Later, when the room had quieted and twilight softened the edges of the world, Agent Danvers returned. She stood by the window, watching Willa sleep. The judge denied bail, she said. Cited the extraordinary callousness of the alleged crime. I nodded, fingers gently brushing Willa's hair from her forehead. What will you do now? Danvers asked. The question hung in the air as I looked out the window at the distant pine-covered mountains that almost became our grave. 10 days ago, I had no answer. Now, watching my daughter's peaceful breathing, I found I still didn't. But for entirely different reasons. At the present, the white willow sapling bends with the spring breeze, its silver green leaves catching the morning light. I press my palms into the fresh soil around its slender trunk, feeling the cool earth beneath my fingernails. 6 months ago, my hands trembled from exhaustion and fear. Today, they're steady and certain. Is it happy now, Mom? Willa kneels beside me in our garden, her dark hair pulled back in a braid similar to mine. At 9, almost 10, her face has lost some of its roundness, but her eyes remain Alden's, thoughtful and warm. I think so. I sit back on my heels, surveying our backyard sanctuary. Raised beds burst with herbs, lemon balm, mint, chamomile, and dozens more. A practical garden that feeds both body and soul. So different from the forest floor where I once frantically searched for medicinal plants while Willa burned with fever. The phone rings inside our Hood River cottage. I wipe my hands on my jeans and head toward the kitchen, where sunlight streams through windows that face the Columbia River. Victoria. Maddox. My voice sounds different these days, stronger, with a certainty I had forgotten was mine. It's over, Emma, my business partner and the friend who stood by me when others scattered, announced. 14 years for Tobin, 8 each for Russell and Diane. I trace my finger along the smooth countertop, remembering the rough bark I once clung to while climbing down a ravine. Thank you for being there. I couldn't stop. Emma's voice was firm. You would have done the same. Besides, watching their faces when the judge read those sentences was she paused. Satisfying. Through the window, I watch Willa carefully watering the willow. The tree that saved her life now grows in our garden, a reminder not of what we endured, but what we overcame. Any regrets about not attending? Emma asks. None. I pull a batch of blueberry scones from the oven, Alden's recipe that Willa and I make every Saturday morning. We're planting a tree instead. After hanging up, I arrange the scones on the blue ceramic plate Willa painted last month. The kitchen smells of butter, vanilla, and possibility, so far removed from the smoke of desperate campfires and fear. Outside, Willa has set up her easel. Another forest painting takes shape. Under her careful strokes, not dark and threatening, but alive with filtered light. The therapist says this is how she processes. I say this is how she transforms. Snack time, artist. I set the plate on our patio table. She wipes her hands on a cloth and studies me. You got the call, didn't you? About the bad people. I've never lied to her, not even when the truth was brutal. Yes, justice happened today. Willa nods once, then takes a scone. Good. Nothing more needed. Saying, tomorrow, 12 women will gather in our living room for the first meeting of the wilderness skills class I'm teaching. The waiting list grew to 40 names after the newspaper article. I turned down the national interviews, the book deals, the documentary requests. One local story was enough, focusing not on the betrayal, but on the warning signs of financial exploitation that others might recognize. Willow and Thyme reopened 3 months ago with a new line of wilderness survival teas. The forest floor blend sells out weekly. At dusk, after Willow went inside, I sit alone in the garden. The white willow's bark glows in the fading light. I run my fingers along it, remembering how I stripped similar bark with numb hands to brew fever-reducing tea for my daughter. We made it, Alden, I whisper to the evening air. Where once I feared silence, I now find peace in it. Where once I needed others' approval, I now stand complete. The wilderness stripped everything away but what mattered most, and in doing so, showed me my own strength. The porch light clicks on. Willa stands in the doorway in her pajamas, silhouetted against the warm light of our home. Mom, she asks, her voice sleepy but curious. Are we going camping this summer? The question catches me off guard. My breath hitches, a momentary tightness in my chest. Then I look at her, standing there, unafraid despite everything, and something shifts inside me. I smile gently. Yes, but this time, we'll bring extra snacks.